So we're going to grind wild rice into meal and flour. So the meal is going to be similar to cornmeal. Today we're going to be using a magic bullet, but you can use another conical shaped blender. You can use a coffee grinder. And if you also happen to have some sort of flour grinder, you could use that instead. So we're going to take some wild rice that we've already rinsed and dried. So again, we rinsed it in clean water and we dried it in the oven at right around 170 or as low as the oven can go. We're just going to fill it up about a quarter of the way. Do a little bit at a time, maybe a little less than a quarter. For ours, our lid goes on nice and tight. Now we're going to put it on our blender, and it's going to be kind of loud. And so we're blending until we can see that a good majority of it has been broken down. You're going to start to see something that kind of looks like sand build up on the side. That's going to be the flour. I don't see any large bits, but I want some more flour, so I'm going to blend it a little bit longer. Again, looking for what maybe might look like more sand build up rather than a bit of gravel. So here we go again. There we go, and it's looking a little finer now. It's good to take breaks because this is really tough on a motor. You can actually run out a coffee grinder pretty quick making wild rice flour. So we're going to take the lid off. And here we have a sifter that's about a medium grade. And so it's going to catch any pieces of rice that are bigger than about the size of cornmeal. So we're going to pour all that in there and just shake, shake, shake. As you can see, we're getting some wild rice to go through, and that's going to be the flour and the meal. And what we'll do with what's left in the sifter is we'll put it right back through the blender again and blend it until it's a bit more fine. There we go. So now we're going to take what's left, which is going to be again the meal and the flour. And we've used foldable plates, so we can just pour it right into a sifter. This sifter is a lot more fine, so it's going to catch the meal, but it won't catch the flour. So it's just going to let that flour go right on through. As you can see, it's collecting. Okay. What you're left with is very thin, powdery substance, which is your flour. It feels a lot like whole wheat flour. And then you're also going to be left with something that looks like a dark cornmeal. And so these are going to be just a little bit bigger. These are going to be great for your wild rice cornmeal cookies. You could also use it as a polenta or as any sort of cornmeal substitute. That's how you grind wild rice into flour into wild rice meal. So when you use wild rice meal in replacement for cornmeal, you can use a 1-to-1 ratio. However, for the wild rice flour, it's an alternative flour, so you don't want to use more than 30%. Ideally, you want to keep it to 25% of your original recipe. So for example, if you have a recipe for biscuits that calls for 2 cups of all-purpose flour, you're going to be best suited to substitute only 25% of that flour with wild rice flour. So that would be a half cup of wild rice flour and 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. Otherwise, you're going to come out with a product that's really dense, and you might even come out with a product that doesn't hold together because rice is missing the compound that keeps breads together and cohesive. So just something to think about when you're using your wild rice meal and your wild rice flour in all your cooking.